Joining us now with more is Reverend Al Sharpton, the president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC. Rev Al, it's always a privilege to see you, my friend. I want to thank you for being with us this morning. Just wondering, what stood out to you most from your interview with the vice president?
Well, I think what stood out most was her being very clear that she was going to work to earn every vote. There's been the issue raised about black men allegedly moving toward Trump, though I certainly have questioned some of the polls, and I've not seen that on the bus tour that National Action Network has done. There are some black men, but there's always been some that would vote Republican. In the last several cycles, you could see that, including when Barack Obama ran. So I think for her to emphasize that I'm not taking anything for granted, I'm going to earn it, even though I dispute what they're trying to allege, I thought that stood out. I also think that it stood out that she sees herself as one that is trying to help people on the ground. Because I said a lot of people don't understand Beltway talk when we say that Inflation Reduction Bill or infrastructure bill. What does it mean? And she broke down exactly what will go to people, and I think that's a real concern that people want to know, what does this have to do with me? So I thought it was a good conversation.
Yeah, and, you know, Al, I want to kind of play for you a little bit of what she told you, play for our audience, a little bit of what she told you about her efforts to garner more support from black men. Listen to this.
I must earn the vote of everyone, regardless of their race or gender. And what can be frustrating sometimes is to have journalists ask me this question as though one should assume that I would just be able to take for granted the vote of black men. I think that's actually an uninformed perspective. Because why would black men be any different than any other demographic of voter? They expect that you earn their vote.
You know, Al, it's so she was so clear on this, and the fact that, you know, one should presume that any candidate would take any vote for granted. Do you buy into this narrative, Al, that the vice president is losing support within the black men?
Absolutely not. I mean, as I said, if you look at the data from going back to the 60s, there's always been a percentage of blacks, black men included, that voted Republican. There is no data that says that is going to be more of a black vote Republican this time. I think that this is part of the misinformation that has been put out by the Trump campaign. But let me also add, what has Donald Trump done to say he's going to earn these black votes? He just keeps saying, oh, black folks love me. But what does he propose? He said that they saw my mugshot and they related to that. He's going to sell them a Bible for $60 that Gideon gives out free. Where is Donald Trump's policy for black America? She laid it out, from child credit to dealing with health care to dealing with HBCUs. What is his black proposal? Oh, we can go in Project 2025 and get it. They're going to close down the Department of Education. They're going to close down other things we need. And the Supreme Court, that he nominated 3 of those justices, ended affirmative action and took out a lot of what was left in voting rights. That's his plan for black America. And I think that as black Americans begin to understand it, they will not even reach the levels they reached with other Republican candidates in the past.
And you also, Rev, asked the vice president about Israel's war against Hamas. Here's part of how she responded.
Look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But we have got to get this war over with. We got to get the hostages out. We need the war to end. The number of innocent Palestinians that have been killed in Gaza, it's really unconscionable. And we have to be honest about that. And at the same time, listen, I will always stand in terms of Israel's right to defend itself. And we need this war to end.
I mean, Al, I don't think there's anybody on any side that doesn't say we need this war to end, right? I mean, it's so important. But the issues that have been brought forward during this last year of the war in Gaza, and now we're seeing that it's been growing in areas, you know, Lebanon, and I'm thinking of Hezbollah and Iran. How much of an issue do you think, Rev, Hamas and that war is for Democrats going into Election Day?
I think it's an issue. To what degree, I don't know, but it's certainly an issue to people like me that are concerned. And I'm glad that she raised about the civilians when I asked her. In Gaza, 41,000 people killed. I denounced, and most civil rights leaders did, when Hamas had the attack on October 7th, and you saw 1,200 people dead. But the response to that is not 41,000 people, most of which are civilians, many of them children. This needs to stop. Now we're talking Lebanon and Hezbollah and on, and Netanyahu taking a even harder position that no matter what, he's going to go forward. That's why I asked the question. I think that the United States clearly ought to stand up and deal with the question of the protection of Israel. But the protection of Israel and the protection of Netanyahu is two different things. Netanyahu should be protected. I'm not saying he should be harmed in any way. The drones at his house is absolutely wrong, and we ought to defend that. But I'm talking about we should not be protecting him politically by allowing him to prolong this war because he feels that's the way that keeps him from going on trial like his soul brother, Donald Trump.
And so the fact is that, do you think there's anything that the current administration should be doing differently?
I think that they ought to be putting pressure on Netanyahu that since we've seen...
Well, they have.
Well, they need to put even more. I don't know what's going on in the negotiations, but I think that the public needs to be very clear that I think someone had said that the recent killing of the Hamas leader was tantamount to when we got bin Laden. Well, then you go to the next step, and where is that, and why isn't Netanyahu there? The other thing that I find, Jose, is very peculiar to me is that Donald Trump is more aligned with Netanyahu than Biden or Harris has ever been. And why aren't people raising that to him? Why aren't people protesting him? I understood, and some of the members of National Action Network were part of, saying we must raise the question of what's going on in the Gaza, and there were demonstrations and all at Democratic candidates and for Congress all the way up to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Why haven't we seen one demonstration against Donald Trump? Donald Trump went and had a rally in the Bronx. Where was everybody? So are people that are playing games behind the scenes, trying to push this issue, trying to act like Donald Trump would be an alternative when he is more aligned with Netanyahu and the right than the Democrats are in this?
And lastly, Al, NBC News has learned the exonerated Central Park Five, the men wrongly accused of an assault in New York City in 1989, are suing former President Trump for defamation after he asserted during a debate they were responsible for the crime. What's your reaction to this, Al?
I think, you know, two of them have been on tour with me with National Action Network's bus tour, and I think they're right. Donald Trump repeated again that they're responsible, and they have the right when DNA cleared them. It's one thing to say something and you don't know. An accusation is made, you could believe it. But when you know, have scientific evidence, that's another story.
Reverend Al Sharpton, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. I thank you for your time this morning.